If you were looking for the cool demo, it's down the hall. And sorry, wandered in here. I said
We're going to talk about our co-op. So yeah, obviously you've made it to the talk about creating a concept art co-op. So actually it says Eli has claimed that I'm going to start it off, but I'm not. Eli's going to start it off with his name's first.
so. Real quick, show of hands. Who here is familiar with Wild Blue Studios prior to coming to the panel? Hi.
Hell yeah, hey.
One or two stream viewers in there, probably. Hi, good to see you. So Wild Blue Studios is an art house. We make concept art, illustration, motion graphics, primarily for video games clients as an external developer. So this is kind of setting the table. So think like your Six More Vodkas, your Mass Blacks, your Moon Colonies, your Invarst, that type of business model. But what makes us different from those is that we are a worker cooperative. And that's most of what we're going to talk about today. All of you know how to make art. All of you know that there's a business of art. We're going to talk about a different way to do the organizational piece of it. So, hi, I'm Eli Allen, founder and studio director.
Chris McGeorge, our Chief Operating Officer.
And I'm Alex Leonicki. I'm a senior concept artist.
And now we can go to the next slide where you get to look at the rest of us. So this is the current membership of Wild Blue Studios. Up here in the board, misleadingly for our talk about flat hierarchies, positioned above. I assure you, it's just because of the constraints of the slide. Myself and Chris are on the board, and Tony is the director of art on the board, who's kind of like the senator for the art team at the board level decision making, and that's a rotating seat. Actually, technically, they're all rotating seats. I just keep getting elected to mine. And we might make sure that anyone who wants to take on representing artists there. So, Alex.
That's me,
Yeah.
in case you couldn't tell.
Not everybody has matching avatars yet. Becca Hallstedt, senior concept artist and UI illustrator. Jerry O'Flaherty, senior director of 3D and CG. Josh, our new project manager. Maddie Julik, illustrator. Maz Tessera, illustrator. Mitch Malloy, art director, lead artist. Nargis Jafari, illustrator. Taylor, senior concept artist, and Tipso, illustrator. This is me. What I did before this is I worked in sporting goods. If anybody's familiar with the sport of disc golf, all one of you, I worked in making bags for disc golf. That was my first sort of career thing. And then after that, by the good graces of people who believed in me a lot more, I went to Riot Games, where I worked for 3 years on the art operations team.
In my background, I'm coming out of academia. I did a PhD in art history at USC, and then worked for the USC Huntington Early Modern Studies Institute, the USC Visual Studies Research Institute. Also did some certificates with UC Cinematic School of Arts. My research was on stained glass and murals, 19th century public art forms. But I also am on the board of Flint Public Art Project and have produced, in 2019, 100 murals alone. So I've done a lot of public art production before I joined Wild Blue.
I worked at Naughty Dog and Wonderstorm. I've been a lot of things in game. Also, do you love the image that I found for Google of that's what a freelance artist is, in case you were wondering. That's what it looks like.
I think we can all relate to that.
I like it because there is a horse. So, that part resonated with me personally, but imagine drawing like that on the ground. But yeah, I've worked in games since 2007. Which way? Sports games, and then into Naughty Dog, Wonderstorm. I worked on Face Festival with it, so I've done a lot of random job.
So we're gonna dive into the nitty gritty here. What is Wild Blue Studios? Wild Blue Studios is a worker cooperative that primarily produced all of. I gave you that spiel already. Founded in 2017. We've been fully remote from our inception. We're everybody works from home. We have members all over the country. We're in 10 states, and we're making our first international hire right now, which is exciting. So we had a couple years of practice in before everybody had to start working remote, which was useful. But we remain dedicated to that model, and it's foundational to kind of our shtick about how to make work as humane as possible. Is you should be able to do it from anywhere. 14 members, on track to ship 1,200 plus assets in calendar year 2022, which is pretty good volume. And the hypothesis that underpinned it, when I was sitting in my bedroom in 2017, freaking out about what I was going to do next with my life, decided that a worker ownership model can thrive in the rapidly expanding art XDev being external development, which is kind of a phrase to watch out for. It's replacing outsourcing as the term of art. But the worker ownership model can work for a studio in that space, and the self-management skills of experienced freelancers primarily, and also just artists of all stripes, allow for the formation of a high-performance remote work environment. People are already practiced at doing this, so that's okay. That's good. So if you're a stream viewer, then we make the distinction between professional artists, hobbyists, and stuff. Quite frequently, everybody in this room is an artist. Everybody in the world is an artist to some degree or another. The question, is, okay, are you a fisherman like this, or are you a fisherman like this? What can you do? What extremes of pressure can you work under? What the volume can you pull? And are you on the hook for paying your bills with your art? That's what defines the transition to professional. And now let's talk about cooperatives. And we're talking about what a cooperative is, and I swear these other two people are going to speak a lot more later. I've been here the longest. So it's very useful to talk about what a cooperative is not. A cooperative is not a magic bullet for a happy culture. People are people. They carry in their own baggages, their own behaviors, everything, and their own, they're going to act how they act in the workplace. It's not all craftspeople all the time. We advise a lot of nascent cooperatives, people interested in founding cooperatives, and it's typically groups of 3 to 5, former colleagues, friends who are all in the same artistic discipline, and they're like, okay, we want to found a cooperative. I'm like, cool. Who's your finance person? Who's your producer? Who's your, And they're like, we're not gonna have those. I'm like, all right, because what happens is somebody has to do it anyway. Your craftspeople can stretch to fill those roles periodically, but as your work expands, the necessity of running a company means that somebody has to take on sales, production, again, compliance. Somebody has to file your taxes, and you have to have a plan for that.
I think too, like to add to that, like every time like you as a creative are not making art in a business that depends on you making art is like when you're not generating profit, right? So yeah, at a certain point, you're going to have to offload some of that work, and it's going to make more sense to do that, especially as you like scale. And getting somebody who like has a skill set that's their specialty is managing all of those things for you so that you don't have to. And chances are, if you're an artist, like you don't really want to be talking to your accountant and like doing all of that other like side stuff.
I do not. I do not ever want to do that.
So get someone who can do like production, and then have them field like your legal and your finance team, and get a legal and a finance team, like step number 1.
In my role as founder of the company, my job was to wear every single hat that somebody else wasn't wearing, and eventually identify the ones that I was really bad at, and give them to other people who were better as quickly as possible, right? And the thing about, when you're not making art, you're not generating income, you're a cost center. And Alex confirming that most artists don't want to do the organizational piece. That's kind of the core foundational sort of value pitch to joining the cooperative is, hey, you get to do the art piece and we handle the back office. There's people who are supported by your work that handle all the stuff you don't want to do, and also ideally bring you bigger, juicier jobs. A key concept that I like to emphasize to people is, if you are a freelance artist, if you are an artist, you are already running a small business. You are already doing all the jobs of a founder, because your only product is your own time. So to emphasize Chris's point, anytime you're not making art, but you're doing all the other things you have to do as a freelance artist, managing clients, filing taxes, all these things, is time that you are not billing your clients for, and it affects your income, and is also a key component of how you should figure your rates. But that's another panel.
I actually have some hard values for that too, because I was between Wonderstorm and Wild Blue. I did freelance for just over a year, and I track all of my hours when I'm working, and I track them. I specify what I'm doing, so I would put in admin basically, and I would say admin accounted every month for in between a quarter and a third of my time spent. So it's also exhausting. Like, I have severe executive dysfunction, so that's only the time that I actually sat down and did it. Like, I would turn the clock on when I was doing it. It doesn't account for the time that it just occupied space in my mind that should have potentially been occupied by something else. So.
Yeah, and this all fits together to the thing, you have to do it anyway. Might as well be somebody who's good and fast at it, and then who doesn't experience mental anguish from having to do these tasks, right? And that's why you team up together and form a cooperative. So it's not all craftspeople all the time. You should look to find specialists in the other areas of running business that you can offload those things to, and everyone will be happier. It is not an environment without seniority. A lot of the people talk about flat hierarchy. They talk about looking for a world without titles, etc. I think in a business where you're selling your time, it's important to realize that much like we don't have Alex doing our taxes because that would be ludicrously expensive to pay her salary to do our taxes, much slower than use somebody else. Yeah. Even within the craft segment, not an hour of everybody's time does not produce the same amount of work. That's why concepts of seniority exist. And what's crucial to the cooperative ideal is you have, a growth path in seniority that's acknowledged in compensation and responsibilities in your craft work, but you have equal power in voting in how to administrate and run your workplace. So we call it, what is it?
Right. Oh yeah. If you tune into stream, you probably heard us say this before, but we call it vertical structure, horizontal structure, vertical deployment.
Yeah.
So that means that we all have equal sort of power or authority within the company, but they're still deployed, on that sort of traditional hierarchy. So that means that let's say your art director gives you some, piece of feedback. You can always say, hey, actually, I kind of disagree with that. What about these other ideas? And you're not widely out of line for having done that. The AD can still come back and be like, no, I need to do it that way because there's still the AD, right? But there's not that same sense of power sort of tension. And then also everyone in the company has the power to call for a vote to recall the board. So if Eli, myself, or Tony, or any of us does something that other people on boards might have done in the industry, you can just all add, even as the most junior member of the studio, you could call for us to be recalled from our position and then be replaced on that board.
Yeah. It's really important. I'm the founder, right? Only by dint of having started the company, but it affords me no special position or largesse within the company. I can be fired by my employees any old time that I've failed to meet their expectations on a grand enough scale. And I think that's good. It is not fueled by good vibes alone. There will be conflicts. You will have to have procedures and process and trust involved in how you navigate the bad vibes that will arise, particularly with the pressures of production and growth. And it is, alas, not an opt-out for capitalism. It is ultimately still a business. The concept of cash flow still applies to you. You will still need operating capital, and ultimately it all funnels to the same place. So what is it? It is a more ethical way to structure and administrate a business. It is a foundational guarantee of inalienable tools for workers to govern their own workplace. They cannot be taken away from you without your own participation. and it is a really good way for people who are highly aligned on what they want to build but don't have a lot of money to start moving forward as a group. And one of the key learnings I can pass on to all of you is people treat you very differently if you have a logo at the bottom of your email and you have a title it doesn't matter how many of you there actually are, what your experience is, your seniority is. They foundationally react to you differently, will afford you different opportunities, and will pay you different amounts of money. Here's some stuff we made.
I do want to say one other thing about like what a cooperative is, and it like fundamentally, especially the way that we operate, it's a business, and I think that can get lost sometimes, especially as people are coming and transitioning like right out of school and have a lot of craft knowledge, and have also a group of people who don't have maybe employment yet or demand on their time elsewhere, and so they can come together to do the craft part, but there's that business component of it that is really important to show up. You can still come together and do that without that background and knowledge, but as we were talking before, there has to be someone who's going to take that on as the skill set that they're going to start to try and learn or acquire, as you set up, with the idea that maybe you can offload it once you're established. But first and foremost, I think a business is going to be the thing to emphasize.
And I will go further and be specific. I had $11,000 when I started Wild Blue Studios, which is not a lot of money to start a business. Concepts like that goes into it costs money to get a business license. It costs money to retain a lawyer, hire a bookkeeper, all these things that you put in place. So you need some amount of starting capital, but it can be kind of low. The other thing I had was the ability and willingness to work at pretty much subsistence wages while I got the whole thing set up, right? So that's a concept called sweat equity, which is the work that you put in is during the early stages has monetary value to the company that you can track and recognize. So when you're starting something, it's not all about having an overwhelming pot of cash. It's about understanding what you have to invest, whether that be money or time, that may be compensated lower than you ultimately feed to be, in order to get things off the ground. So so we've come a long way. This is all stuff that we're very proud of. This one's actually a banner in the exhibitor hall right now, which is very cool. I was very startled when I looked up and saw it. And oh yeah. And so the last thing I want to talk about is, or the next section is going to be about the other thing that we do, which is apply a cooperative process and mindset to creating these things. I mean, it's one thing to look at this on the screen, but realize that this is painted large enough to be printed on a billboard and yada yada, things like this. Everything is up to rigorous standards. There are tons and tons of IP stakeholders and things on this. The creation of these types of pieces at splash quality, KV quality render is pretty rigorous, and they don't actually pay most of our bills. All the stuff that's in our portfolio that we show off is the very tip of the iceberg. The rest of the stuff that we do in a year is like hundreds of emotes and icons and chests and coins and graphic design doodads and UI illustrations that every game is comprised of tens of thousands of illustrated elements, right? And so the cool flashy stuff goes in the portfolio, but these are ultimately investments for us that advertise our company and our services. And the economic engine of the company is stuff that we almost never even show the public because, frankly, we don't want more people asking us for it. We're about all we can handle. So,
Endlessly.
yeah, endless. Sweats nervously looking at. So I'm gonna stop blabbering quite as much and turn it over to these two to talk about. I mean, there's three kind of different eras of Wild Blue represented on this panel. I've been around from the very beginning. Chris,
just over 3 years now.
Like 3 months, I think.
Yeah.
Like soon.
But such a dyed-in-the-wool believer that she's here on the panel with us. So we've all seen it to varying degrees and been parts of developing these working methodologies. So we're going to just step you through sort of some of the process on this that highlights how a group of I think we credited 9 artists on this piece. How 9 people can kind of create something greater than the sum of the squared. So you'll all be familiar with the thumbnail stage. There are multiple artists contributing thumbnails here. So this is all the set 7 KVs that could have been an art. But yeah, I think there are 3 different artists contributing thumbnails here. So we get a big wide spread. And
I think too, like one thing that I want to add to that is sometimes as artists, like when I came in, at least there's this little bit of like, you're usually, especially as a freelance artist, used to kind of working by yourself. And so there is this level of like, having to get over the fact that like you're working with a bunch of other people and it's not about like, oh, they're going to pick theirs over mine or anything like that. Like, because at the end of the day, you're all going to absolutely touch this thing and spend a lot of time on it. You have to change your mentality to be like, we're a team and it's not about me anymore. It's about getting the best final product out, which in the end, I do think is making me a better artist, because I'm thinking ahead about like this rest of this team has to work on this as well. So like, and we have to be consistent. It has to, in the end, it doesn't look like 10 artists worked on it. It looks like one artist pulled off this incredible piece. And that comes down to trust in each other and unification in the goal, that we're not trying to stand out. We're trying to work together to get this thing done in a timely manner.
I think too, like being an external development partner, that like we go through our own internal rounds of art direction, and then it goes to the client, and the client then puts it through, our direction. And sometimes we work with clients who then send it to another client who gives it to her. So like the extent to which it's one artist's vision at any point is like not the reality, right? And sometimes our art director likes to emphasize that when you step in the door and you're doing work like this, like you're no longer an artist, you're an aesthetic technician.
the aesthetic technician.
Where like your job is to make things look good for a brief that somebody else is handing you, working in an IP that someone else has created, right?
Which I actually find pretty freeing. Like I've said this before about even just working at Naughty Dog on big IPs. Those aren't mine. Like I gave a lot of myself to Naughty Dog and to specifically The Last of Us. And at the end of the day, I don't own any of that. That's The Last of Us. It's owned by Sony. It's a corporate product. And so I think it's very important for us as artists to learn to separate ourselves and to give ourselves the time and the space to make art that's meaningful to us, that's separate from the thing that we make money off of. And I think that this situation has really kind of driven that home to me, that is possible to, provide what I can do as a skill with a group of other people and care about it on a high level, but it doesn't become my only thing. Like, it's not my creative, outlet. My creative outlet is mostly making horses, honestly.
And it's, I think, the slide about what it is to be a professional artist and what a cooperative actually is, I think underpins what I believe is a foundational mindset to success with founding cooperative, which is understanding that if you want to do this as a job, if you want to be a professional artist, if you're on the hook for your bills, for your art is labor, the creation of art is labor, and the art product is a commodity.
Yeah.
So this is, where we've kind of already moved into like a flats and blocking stage for the piece. So you can see where we're, at this point, a color of them has already been selected. Like it's kind of a stage we just sort of skipped over. And we're starting to just sort of put in real flat, colors, and we're getting ready to start dividing it up and assigning it to different people.
And you can see certain parts are already moving ahead of others, because I think the next slide should demonstrate why this is.
I just want to say real quick that another thing about this is I'm not an artist that Riot would ever in a million years pick to work on their stuff. Like there's no world in which Riot would reach out to me to do something like this, because I just don't on my own do it. But I have contributed to with 2 or 3 of these now. I do the line for some of these, and so that is a thing I'm very capable of doing. I would not do the full thing on my own ever. So it is kind of cool in that regard, because I am working on stuff that I would just not normally work on. It just doesn't really fit the portfolio that I currently have.
And I think that's really, we don't always, for every single piece that we do, break it up this way, but we do often, especially when a production schedule sort of demands us to move quickly, because that lets us be like, oh, Alex, you're really fast and really good at getting lines right on the first pry with very little feedback. And so we're like, Alex, you're going to do the lines on this. And then we have, some artists who paint metal really great, some who are really good at water, some who are really excellent at clouds. And so it's easy to just divide up the different pieces, and you can get, the same piece done in way less time because we're playing to everybody's strengths. And, it becomes something that then everyone is sort of in their sweet spot on, and, it's a little more fun while working under pressure to get to the things you already like and are good at.
So go to the next one because I think it has this one.
It should just sort of like a part way through, and then you can see.
Here's how it's broken out. Here's where the 9 artists work, and it can be as small as you can see all the things that are labeled Mads. Mads did the ears on the mouse and the foreground mushrooms, right? Like it's that granular and that focused, as Chris was saying, per artist's capability and where they shine. So, this. I mean, every time we do a KV, there's 5 or 6 stages where it gets recombined and then rebroken out like this.
I think the other thing that I really like about this is that on such a high sort of fidelity illustration like this, like normally you'd have only like your senior artists working on it, right? And with breaking it out like this, Mads is one of our more junior artists. She's an associate in our studio, and yet she still gets to participate in really meaningful ways to these big illustrations. And also it allows us to sometimes take bigger gambles by giving larger bites to more junior artists while still hedging against, like, if you didn't sign the entire thing to her and she's, or to any junior artist, that's a lot of pressure versus being like, hey, here's one little piece of this. Or then the next time, here's a little bit bigger piece. And so it becomes really important in sort of our educational internal like opportunities that we're providing our young artists as well, so that young artists aren't only working on like the emotes and the icons and those other things that power so much of the rest of this.
And to Chris's point, when we took over the KV product for TFT, we took it over from the then art director who was soloing these, right? Just every KV that you see prior to set 6 was done by one guy just moving mountains, right? And it burnt him out so bad I think he left the company. So like that's what we mean by making this possible, sustainable, moving it from a place where only the seniorest of seniors gets to climb these mountains, and instead turning it into a group project that gives juniors a taste of it and allows them to grow towards the ability to do larger and larger chunks.
It's also like production-wise very functionally similar to working on a game. Like any of you who have worked in a game dev studio know that like your role is just one of many, and there'll be points in production where you look at the product as it is right now and you're like, there's no way that this is gonna get done. Like we are gonna ship Naughty Dog's first completely unfinished game, and I'm gonna be in there as part of it. Never was gonna blame me. So it's like that in a sense where like you get to see it kind of all fall together, and there is something really special about like seeing the end result of the work of a bunch of people coming together with that same goal. So yeah, I find that the process of it just reminds me of just in general how game dev works.
And one of our foundational, like when we're hiring people, is the same people who are contributing to this at a very high level are also have emotes and icons to do on their schedule as well, because you can't run full tilt on these things all the time. There's cycles of production and check-in where they'll go into the tank for feedback for days or a week at a time, and you have to you can't just be idling your team in that space. And so the idea that even our Mitch Malloy are effectively my co-founder and the lead artist at Wild Blue is, I think, the paragon of this, where he's capable of taking these images all the way to finish by himself, but he also does more little borders and stuff than any human alive. Like he just and the idea that nobody in the studio, no matter your seniority, should view these tasks as beneath you, because ultimately the goal is not to put your name on the most or the best assets. The goal is to hit our group revenue target so that everybody gets their pay raise at the end of the year and gets the holiday break and goes home happy and only has to work a certain number of hours a week, because we're doing it to support each other, not to churn out or we separate our working art from our personal art at this point.
Terrific.
And then this is the final again, so you can kind of see how it all comes together. And then also some of the choices that get made along the way. Like I think the most noticeable one in these is just sort of the directions of the light rays on the sword. I think they were sort of bipect in the face in some earlier iterations, and just the sort of layers of polish they could put on as they go through.
And I wish I could open the PSD for you too, because the other thing that we emphasize, or part and parcel of being able to work this way, is like very rigorous file hygiene, very rigorous separation of elements, because not only do we need it for and from each other, we need it because the client will hit you at final with, hey, can you completely refactor this entire thing? You're like, so you better not have painted it flat directly onto the character.
I think these are very, very large files. Like, how many happen?
They're PS bigs. I think they're 16,000 aside or something.
That won't stand.
Yeah.
That's what we call it.
What does it stand?
But I mean, I feel like 'cause sometimes when we're breaking up work, we have to just send like one layer, and then the artist will like compare it to like the sort of PNG of the combined file, rather than have like that full PSB and we incorporate layers.
There are literally only some people in the company who can do the post passes on these, not because they're the only ones capable of it, but because they have the only machines that can run the file. So, so, so that's kind of the thrust of it, right? And the other half of this, I think, should be question and answer from people, because we want this to be a place where you like, hey, if I wanted to do this, how would I go about it? What do I need, etc. One piece of information that I think I skipped over is talking about the foundational unit of a cooperative, which is all companies have ownership shares. Publicly traded companies, ownership shares can be bought on the stock market as stock. That's those are the same things. It's fractional ownership in a company. In a cooperative, everybody has one share of ownership, all in the same class. You're issued a share upon joining as a member, and so with that is that's how you create that equal power in corporate governance, because even publicly traded companies, shareholders get together to vote, right? There are shareholder meetings and corporate things that require voting from shareholders. That happens in a cooperative as well, but nobody can own more of the company. I don't own 2 shares of Wild Blue. I own 1. So that's the really crunchy functional underpinning of it. And then Chris can also talk about, because we started as an LLC with cooperative governing principles, intending always to transition to a cooperative, and Chris did a lot of work to actually move us over to Co-op Corp.
Yeah, I think like that, I mean, being an LLC provided a lot of flexibility for us at first, because we just didn't have the cash flow to, have everyone be a W-2 employee with benefits. And so we just had everyone hired as contractors, and because it wasn't like a full-time amount of work. And so as we leveraged the LLC as sort of the, liability protection that it provides, and, built that business around it, once we had enough cash flow, then we transitioned into the cooperative. I would say it's expensive to do that transition from LLC to the C Corp like we did. It's possible to stay an LLC with the cooperative sort of bylaws in that way, but I think it was really important to us to incorporate in the way that we did, and to be able to break up the structure that the B is for. Especially, we operate in some states now, but it was just talking the very account that did the most sense for us in that way. But part of that foundation, I think, that was really pivotal for us, is that it allowed us to move from being, a contractor to being employees. And so that meant that the company takes care of a lot of the tax burden for us that you don't get when you're an independent contractor, and also able to extend healthcare benefits and pay and do all of those things. Was sort of like top of the priority if we were it's becoming real.
Alex, any final thoughts before we go to Q&A?
No, I think if you all have questions, yeah. I mean, I think some of them do. Like the ones that I've been in, at least, there's just been so much work and not enough art. And so the labor has to get split up, thinking more about like, you just have to get all this stuff done. And like, particularly on both Uncharted and Last of Us, both Last of Us, and it's, like, there was endless characters, endless costumes. I think that in the end, we had like 1,000 environment concepts or something like that from the entire production. Like, so there's just not enough time to if you didn't have enough resources to be that. Whereas here, like, I think that we, you know, it is a little bit different where it's not like the weight of an entire game projects on us. That they filter through the stuff that, you know, we're getting in. We're not, and they never take on too much that like we're all like swamped and drowning in work constantly. That's not really the case in game dev though. Like, you are literally just, there is constantly something for you to do. Yeah. Yeah. There's just more that has to get done. So it's like, it doesn't make sense to have multiple people like navigating that. Like, if there was like most of the time I was on very specific characters environment, people would take an entire level and be like, this is the, you know, the Myth Jindro level, this is the Aton level, and they basically parsed the rest of it, like in so many ways. They did so much of the concept for it. So I think it depends on the production, honestly. Like, and every production is different. Like, they can speak more to Riot, and you can speak more to
Yeah, I mean, to Alex's point, some do. It just gets hidden from you in a lot of ways. A lot of the germ of me learning this process or wanting to institute it in us comes from my time at Riot, 2015 through 2017, and working really closely with the Splash team. At least one member of which from that era is in the audience today, where they worked very similarly to that. It wasn't quite as distributed as this, but there would be periods of dogpiling. They would hand pieces back and forth to get individual solves. Somebody would be like, "Hey, I need your metal on this. I need you to render the, you know, like I can't look at this anymore. Can you, you know?" So, I do think that happens to some degree, but it's on teams where they are staffed enough, resourced enough, and aligned enough where that tends to develop organically amongst team members. A more distributed, higher velocity production with less camaraderie. I mean, that was just Splash, right? I don't know. I can't actually even speak to how much that happened elsewhere within Riot, but some teams will develop it organically. Other teams can't afford to.
there is still like, we do still have sharing, or we did, sorry, still have like sharing of stuff. Like, I remember a couple marketing pieces that passed around to like a few people. And like, definitely you have each other notes on each other's ending. There's a rest normal at every studio, but yeah, the like beauty and pain of game dev is every single studio is different. It has a completely different pipeline, and you have to learn it when you start on a new one. So yeah, I think it just would depend on the pipeline and like the resources and the ones that resource with like Riot.
I think it depends too on the amount of time that you're given for the piece, right? So like I said, we don't do every piece this way. So, you know, we'll do splash work where we just have one artist on it, and it's pretty much just that one artist until it gets to sort of maybe some final polish by our art director. But, you know, we do that when we have, you know, maybe a couple months 2 months to do that piece rather than 4 weeks, you know? And so it shifts a lot, I think, in why you would choose to do this method. You know, when you're doing pieces like this that have a lot of different figures and components and, you know, are this large, and you have a compressed timeline, and you also have a bunch of other assets in production, you know, it's easier to, I think, do the dogfight.
Or if he'd had to paint the Sistine Chapel in 1 year rather than however long, he would have needed to deploy an entire workshop, right? So it goes back to the fisherman slide, which is a visual metaphor that I'm very proud for having come up with. I'm personally obsessed with, is those KVs by necessity of products development. And there was a great talk this morning that really highlighted product thinking for artists. But by the time we're getting the brief for those KVs, that set is 6 weeks from shipping. And that piece needs to happen in 5 weeks so that every other agency and global publishing apparatus can get the source file, chop it up into whatever they need, create the assets, go through their own approvals, etc. And so all of a sudden you're on the crab boat, and you have to figure out how you're gonna make.
Spent a long time trying to find the perfect image for that metaphor.
Great question.
I think that kind of gets back to the horizontal structure vertical deployment thing. So, yeah, not every. I guess it depends on what types of things you mean saying no to. Do you mean types of projects? Do you mean
Have you been sitting in on our board meetings? This is uncanny.
Yeah, I do. We actually there's so all of those requests from clients come through our production end first. So usually myself and Eli, and then the first thing we do is evaluate like if it fits into our production schedule, if the rate matches our expectations. If there's any flexibility around that and strategic reasons why we might want to take that client. And then, we'll take it, to our art director, and he'll decide like, if he's comfortable with what the ask is, and if he thinks that we have the people on staff who aren't otherwise deployed across other projects. Or if we want to tap into maybe some of our reliable contractors to help support on the product. And so there's some sort of strategy that happens behind the scenes. There's definitely projects that have come through that just don't have a timeline that would fit, or don't have the pay rate that matches our needs. And we just say those sometimes don't even surface to the art director.
Yeah, but I will say we at least until recently had a chronic yes problem. Partially out of a fear of not meeting sales targets, partially as a fear in our business, like we consider all the other developer studios out there our peers, not our, enemies, or we're not, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not fighting over scraps. But when a new product rolls along and says, hey, we want you first, you get first in the door to try it. Can you do this? It's yes, or it goes to somebody else and you never see it again. And so there is a enormous external incentive to say yes that can manifest as internal kind of fruit thinking yourself into yes and biting off more than you can chew. But Chris has described the healthy process of calculus, and you have to really viciously safeguard that, and you will mess it up a couple times, and then you'll start to recognize the signs, and you'll also recognize who has a yes problem. And so
They do also put it they do put it to us as well. Like I recently said no, I didn't have time for something, like because they put it chat through our chat system, and like this is coming down the pipes, and I just don't think that I have the time for that, like with the type of schedule that they're asking for. So it's not like it gets through them and then just gets like put on us to figure out. Like can also say I don't have the time for this, so either someone else has to do it, or if we just don't do it.
But there is that ingest piece ahead of that, and again, talking about you can't be all crass people all the time. As that ingest piece, as our ability to track utilization per artist and stuff has increased and matured and become an actual system and not just vibes, it has gotten a lot healthier, a lot easier to say no. And there's a fantastic author who I will absolutely plug the books of, Seth Godin. There's a book called The Practice that you should all read, and he has some awesome Udemy courses as well. But The Practice has a section on generously saying no, preventing heartache for yourself and your client by saying this is not going to go well. We're going to say no if you're afraid.
I think one of the things that I'm most proud of contributing and bringing to Wild Blue is really pretty granular time tracking for all of the assets that we do. So for an illustration, we break it down into black and white thumbs, color thumbs, lines, the sort of render check or like half later render, and then like final. And then we have like a 6 day to just polish on top of that final. and everyone who's working on, even we break that down to like icons in that same blank, right? And so, we've been doing that now for about 3 years, and we have really good data on how long it takes people to do each asset type, and also good data on when we're overbooked, how their productivity goes down, right? And so, like, sure, you could, let's say, maybe do an icon in 8 hours, but can you do, 100 of them still at 8 hours a piece in one, in like, like probably not, because there's so much context between as you go from asset to asset to asset, and just sort of the like pressure of like that wall of assignments, like it just starts like that productivity goes down. So measuring that view, it's one of the things we're starting to get better at, I think, when we start to say no. Or also, we've in the past done like, hey, we're overbooked and we're at that threshold. Here's a cool project. We want to say yes to this. If we do, and you all want to say yes, you all have to agree to say yes to this because I think it's going to put us all into overtime. Like, will you say yes? And we've had people say yes before, and we've done a great job on it, and we've had people say no before and we've passed. So, but that data really helps a lot. Yeah, so then we think about where their growth areas are, right? And so, I would say we have not yet offered like a full-time position to someone that we didn't think had the potential to expand into new style, right? And I mean, I think Alice is a really good example of this actually. Who's admittedly, right, her work doesn't read Riot, which if you look at our ArtStation portfolio is a vault of the public-facing work at Nzu. We have a lot of other work in production as well that is different styles than that, but also, we know that Alex has really strong foundations and can contribute to things like drawing and all these other assets or parts of production. And so, we have somebody whose skill set, is maybe really specific to the one style, and we don't have work for them at that moment. Then we're like, okay, what is your most like high potential growth area, and how can we assign you an asset or a part of an asset that lets you develop that? And we build that into our schedule, knowing that it's going to take them more time. Just going to take more time from our art directors or our lead artists who are going to have to give more feedback to that. So it's not something that comes without cost, because you have to have the time from your seniors as well to support that. But that's one way that we still keep that flexible.
Our seniority bands are defined by, on top of ability to run teams, by an artist's craft is measured by their ability to take things to a percentage of final. 60, 75, 80, 85, 90, 100% final. So you don't have to be, if you're outside your area of excellence, you're probably able to still get something up to 50% until somebody else who's excellent at that thing is ready to pick it up. But to Chris's point, it necessitates that it has to be then picked up by somebody who can take it home. So you can keep contributing at a lot of different levels, and we really stress polymathic kind of. I think we have some of the most ridiculously flexible and multi-talented artists. I mean, people who move between concept and illustration can contribute on both sides. Like when Alex first joined and we were like light on concept and we had all these illustrations, we were like, can you? And she was like, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, but like I think too, it's important that like I didn't just jump right into doing like a final image like that or anything like that. I contributed the parts that like I could do, and like that, like they mentioned earlier, it's like as a junior artist coming in, like the junior artists that we do have who aren't as strong in certain areas, they're able to incrementally get to that point. So there's not that expectation on them, which is a terrible expectation to put on a junior, and it's one that a lot of game studios do to people, and it's why juniors burn out so bad in a lot of the AAA studios is there's an expectation put on them to perform at a level that they're not ready to perform at yet, and to do it in the same amount of time that it takes a senior, to that same level of quality for considerably less pay and with considerably less say. And so we don't do that on purpose at the studio. We actually promote growth. We started doing like a bit of a ride along where like people who are interested in this other thing that they don't really do, we'll stream for them while we do it and like talk to them and give them portions of it to work on. And like in a way that's not like cutting into our time, because also like that is also time and labor that we as seniors have to spend. But the studio culture promotes that, like that we do, like I want to help them get better because we're all working together and they're not like juniors. She kind of forgets sometimes which ones are junior level. I don't remember the title thing, because it's like we do have this opportunity to really flex at what you're good at, which promotes feeling good about yourself and feeling confident, which then promotes a desire to continue to learn and grow. Like it only promotes further growth for these people, which is to me the ideal situation after being in so many situations that were just about infusing teachers.
I really like that you said that about like forgetting that they're juniors sometimes, because that's actually something Tone said to me like a couple of months ago. Because I was asking him like, what do you like about the cooperative structure? Because I'm just going to talk about it at GTC, and he was like, I forget all the time that our juniors are juniors, and part of that is because we all have an equal say in how things are run, and also like just the way that we divide things up and work on things collaboratively. Just like I just think of them as my peers in ways that I haven't before.
That's stuff that you should try to hire for, particularly in your seniors, because that, like I said, being a cooperative does not guarantee this. It is not a magic bullet for your culture. That comes from rigorous enforcement of culture at hiring. And so seniors like Tony and Mitch and Taylor and Alex are crucial to sustaining and replicating that culture with each new batch of hires. Let's try for 2 more questions if we time box ourselves pretty good here. Eva Bears. Oh yeah. Oh, it's 2 minutes to go.
Yes, absolutely. You do like it is. You do 3 interviews. So the first one is just with the board, and they kind of vet you before they put you through. Also, before you even get to the interview, anyone at the studio, they say like, we're gonna interview this person. If anybody has any issue, you can DM one of the board members directly. So you don't even have to do it in front of everyone. You can be like, I've had some issues working with them before, and explain yourself, and they're very receptive to that. The second interview is with seniors, I believe, or they did the choice number of seniors based on the role that you're applying to. And then the third one is everybody. So the entire team gets together on a call with this person, and it's very casual. Like by that point, we've all heard, about this person, and we have a good sense of them, and we just sort of feel them out, and then we do a vote afterwards. We get into a chat together with just each other, and we do a vote on if we want to give this person an offer.
Or for like legal reasons, the power to like hire and fire resides with the board. So then the board acts with the direction of that. So the board could still hire somebody like that but you
If I wanted to lose my job,
but just that key little piece, which I think is important, because people sometimes think that everything is decided collectively, but there are some things like hiring and firing that for liability reasons you don't want to collectively each be held liable for a hiring or firing decision. That like, because then if a lawsuit were to occur, it would be 10 people held liable versus like a one person with both that power and authority.
So, yeah. This is a really good question. So what I'll first say is that responsible cooperative building, absolutely one of its cons is it throttles your growth rate at least, and we lean into that really hard. Kind of carved into our masthead is no growth for growth's sake. We'd rather start saying no a lot more often than trying to glom people on and risk ruining cultural alchemy. Because every time you hire somebody, you're handing them keys to the kingdom, right? And so I think it scales kind of as big as you want it to. It will never be quite the same as it was when it was small, but I think it can get big, but you should get big slowly. Must get big slowly, or else it will descend into chaos.
Or I mean, I think it starts to lose what makes the cooperative model, I think, to us so special, which is that sort of supportive, airing, like, environment, and the culture that we've built, right? So it's way easier to maintain culture in a studio of 15 to sort of 30 people than it is in a studio of 200 people, right? And so it starts to maybe feel less like a cooperative at that point. And also your impact or the power of your vote also dilutes each time you add another person, which means your split of the profit also dilutes each time you add it. I think, so there's like a lot of other ways in which some of those thoughts kind of get packaged into what growth and expansion might mean. But we're also trying to build stability and longevity collectively, and not just sort of like, as like a single owner company, you're kind of incentivized to grow big and sell and cash out. But grow big and sell and cash out. Well, if you're cashing out and you're splitting between 200 people, your cash out is like not as good as if you're cashing out as one person. So it sort of disincentivizes that massive growth for sale as like the end goal of the business, and set our end goals to create something that is caring, supportive, sustainable for our members. And the more we grow, the more incentivized we are to keep that sustainability, because to sell, like, you don't get as much return under sale.
We've certainly been courted for acquisition, and we've paused acquisition requests early and paused that process altogether, because it's like, well, right now we feel like we want to get bigger, and getting bigger means that it changes the whole shape of this conversation, and we're more interested in building the longevity machine than we are in taking the payout. Historically, and the last thing I'll say on this is that historically our approach to this has been hire in batches, and understand that each new batch of incoming is basically a 6-month cultural reset, while you get new people used to the temperature of the water here, and they bring their own insights and things.
Baggage.
Oh, I don't want to admit so.
Came with a couple suitcases.
I think we have time for maybe one more. I think I saw your hand back there.
One more.
Not at all. I think, we talked about wanting to do that a little bit ourselves maybe in the future, but I think a good Future Club is a good example of a cooperative who's developing, their own games and their own content.
Glory Society.
Glory Society, Black Flag, which is a cooperative in France. So there's there's Co-op in Canada, Lucid Tail. There's a lot of
Soft Knot Week.
Yeah. There's a lot of cooperatives who, and we're in touch with a lot of those cooperatives who are not doing the service provider model, but are developing their own original ideas.
I think the core differentiator, the reason that we're not developing original IP ourselves, is not because the cooperative model restricts it, but because our monetization, cash flow, and financial model, we are to build original IP would be an entirely different business plan, and that's the reason we're not pursuing it. If you build a correctly structured and financed and resourced business plan devoted to building IP as a cooperative, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to do it, because it kind of comes back to that slide about what a co-op is and isn't. And what a co-op is just a more ethical way to structure your business, and the business can do anything. Ace Hardware is a national cooperative of retail hardware stores, and Tillamook is a cooperative cheese thing, and cheesery. And so the co-op model can be bolted on to there's different types of co-ops as well. There's like platform co-ops. We're a workers cooperative, which is sort of the basic model, and the one that I think is most accessible to artists and people in the industry. But yeah, it really is just, this is some different boxes that you check when you start your business, and some extra things to keep in mind. But you can it really boils down to, do you have the money to build original IP? Is more important than, are you a cooperative?
That's set to be it for us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, all.
Can I take a picture of the audience? Is everybody cool with having a picture taken? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm going to go out to the...